Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this holiday week. I'm sure everybody is busy, so we're going to be respectful of everyone's time and show appreciation for you joining us today by just keeping this as brief as possible. But as always, your questions are very important. So, whatever questions you have, we want to take the time to talk about those. But just to get started, we do want to have a couple of updates on where we're at in the league. And right now we have 62 teams that are fully registered. And so the team registration deadline was November 30th. So we have 62 teams in the league for the 2022 season, which is really awesome. And with that, we have 333 licensed coaches and 770 riders so far have registered, 326 of those in high school and 444 in middle school. Usually that's what we see with the higher numbers in middle school than with high school, but still very big numbers, very promising, especially we're starting to approach really where we were at in 2019, in the 2019 season, or the 2020 season, which started in 2019 and came to an abrupt halt at Browns Creek in 2020. So yeah, that's exciting, and something that I think is due to everyone's efforts to keep things rolling through last year and into this year, which is greatly appreciated. Just a reminder that the deadline for student athletes to register is January 31st. So we anticipate seeing some more growth as we approach that deadline. But that's a very healthy number for our league right now at this point. A couple of things I wanted to talk about just as we start our season practices. Already seeing a couple of injury reports come through. And like first couple happened like basically the first weekend of the season. So right after the December 1st start of the season, we started seeing a couple of injury reports, and they all had some common things. And it was like new rider, not real familiar with what they did, but it looked like they hit the brakes and panicked and maybe went over the bars. There were some wrist injuries and some forearm injuries. And this really is something that we want to encourage everyone to really focus on not being on the trail right now. Like this really is where you're like laying the groundwork for getting them out on the trail. And also just bear in mind that, our role as coaches is to get that new person that's never really experienced mountain biking and get them to be comfortable and confident so that they can get out on the trail. And if your only introduction to how to ride a mountain bike is on a trail ride, like you're sort of just hanging on for dear life and you're not really getting a good background. And some kids would stick with it at that point, and some kids would be like, this isn't for me. But really, we want to make sure that everyone's safe before they get out there, and giving them a lot of opportunity to work on skills and work on building this base set of fundamentals is really, really important. So I really want to encourage you to do that. And I also want to encourage you that, especially in this time, coming from a year of relative inactivity for a lot of our kids, their conditioning is very low. And so making sure that you're doing things to incorporate fitness in a fun way is going to be really, really big. So that's going to be important as well. And you can do that in field work. There's several good field work games and things like that that are in the coach's toolbox. And one that we're utilizing with my own teams is that we're utilizing something called the grass race. And essentially it's just a short little oval or circle on the field. Like we practice in soccer fields. So we actually lay it out or kind of around a soccer field. And it's like track racing for bikes. But instead of it being on the track, it's just on grass. And so you can incorporate different things like the last person across the line each lap is out. So then they have to jockey for position. They have to play with some strategy. There's also like a points race, but just various things just to get them riding and actually riding at a fairly fast tempo is something that is good for incorporating for fitness at this point. And then also incorporating your short course and utilizing that to really focus on different skills so that you're able to get student athletes kind of assessed in a really safe manner is going to be really, really important. One of the things that I also wanted to kind of bring up is this idea of us fostering growth mindset and really fixating on this idea of like, how do we get student athletes from whatever point they're at to getting better? And that's going to be one of those things that's really, it's tricky. It's tricky in the classroom. It's tricky with student athletes, with athletes of any sort. But as athletes get better, they have a better sense of this idea of constant growth and growth as a positive way of getting better at whatever it is they do, no matter what point they're at. And so I really want to kind of give some ideas and things like that that go along with this. And one of them is this idea of a declaration day. This is something that the DC Revolution women's soccer team utilizes. And that is that once a month, they actually have a team event where they have whiteboards, and each person on the team, including non-players, actually runs to the whiteboard and writes down a particular skill that they want to focus on in practice and getting better at for that month. And it has to be a skill. So it can't be some big amorphous, like I want to win a bike race or I want to finish fifth. It's got to be something very concrete and actionable. So I want to get better at cornering, or I want to get better at track standing, whatever it is, it's an actionable skill that they can focus on. And then you can take those ideas and sort of incorporate those into what you do with your practices. But the bigger thing is that you're giving students ownership of that actual piece of the puzzle. And it falls into this idea that we talk about with this belief, growth, and action cycle. And so, you know, the belief that one can get better is really, really important. That belief that you can, even though you're good at something, you can get better at it, leads you to perform actions that go along with that. And those actions are things in practice that you do to get better at something. And that action then results in you growing and you having growth. And that growth kind of reinforces this belief that you can get better at things. And so it's this really virtuous cycle that we can get our student athletes into. And it's something that they can apply not just in sports, but they can apply to anything in life. Like, as long as you believe that you can get better at something, no matter where you're at, then you can take actionable steps to get better at it. And that's something that I really want all of us to be mindful of as we're approaching our practices, so that we can sort of have this approach with our student athletes. And it's something that's important for them, because I hear constantly about like, well, I have all these really good student athletes and, you know, they're way better at this than I am, and they don't feel like they need to do these things. And that belief that you are fundamentally already good at something, and that you don't need to get better, is just as bad as saying, oh, I'll never be good at this, and not taking any action at all. So they both lead to inaction, and we want them to be taking action to get better at something in order to have growth. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas on that?
Hey, Sean Murph,
Hey, Murph.
or should I say Santa Claus?
Long time listener, first time caller.
Exactly. Could you do me a big favor?
Yes.
Could you kind of go, that was good, really good stuff. It was fast.
Sorry.
Could you go back just and give us an example of making it real of both of these two ideas, what the DC Revolution team did, and then this growth belief action. Can you wing it with an example? I get this, the part about the mindset. If they already think that they're good and there's no more growth, then that's just as bad as someone who's a beginner.
Yeah.
It's all about, but make it real. Put it into now practice is about to start. If I've got 15 student athletes, or not 15, 10 at a practice, and I'm going to ask them all what they want to do for that practice, it just seems like a lot. And did I miss something there?
Yeah. So you don't want to do this like at every practice, like, okay, what skill do you guys want to work on?
Yeah.
But think of it as like maybe at the start of the month, then we're going to do declaration day, and this is going to be what you focus on in practice for the next 3 weeks. And so then, they each have like the personal identified thing. You've got this kind of menu of things that you see student athletes want to work on. And so as you're going through your practices, you're sort of incorporating some drills maybe that go along with that, or games, or then just out on the trail, just like stopping and being like, hey, several of you want to work on cornering, and cornering is a great thing. Let's session this corner and see how much faster we can get from the way we start. So let's see what we can do as we repeat it over and over and over again, and see what we start to notice. So this idea of like breaking things down into these fundamental kind of set pieces, so that you're able to get them to focus on that in practice, rather than, I just want to ride my bike. I just want to go out and jump. Whatever it is, like they're focusing on that one thing, and it's something that a lot of student athletes naturally do. Like I noticed that with my own son, left to his own devices, he will go out, and I just went on a ride with him in Rocky Knob at Boone, where he actually met up with a couple of other NICA kids from the Watauga team, and they literally just sessioned this rock roll that was like very technical, but they were just like kind of looking at it and analyzing it and talking about it and practicing it and then talking about different lines and really breaking down this one thing. And that to me is like the essence of that growth mindset, of just being able to focus on one thing and work on it for a while, and not go to mastery, but just go to better. And then knowing that you can come back and get even better. So I think too often our student athletes kind of reach plateaus and don't realize that they're at a plateau. They think they're at a peak, and they think the peak is where they stop. And what they've really done is they've hit a plateau, and they just need to push beyond that to reach the next growth cycle. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, it definitely does. We have to create some boundaries just a little bit though in this declaration, because half of them are going to say, I want to learn how to catch air.
Right.
So it's just
right.
up to the coaches to create those boundaries and give them an idea of what they could be thinking about, and maybe even help them, because we know that there's some areas they need to work on, but it needs to come from them, is what sounds like it's the most important.
And I think that'll help foster some ownership on their part, because we all have that student athlete on our team that is like really good, and they can go a couple of different ways. They could be that kid that's like, diving into practice and hitting those skills and really trying to set not just an example of how to do things right, but just an example of buy-in with practice. Like, this is the way practice is, and we just work on skills. And, this is what we do. Like, we give it our all. Or they're that kid that's like, oh, I already know how to do this. And they just kind of like go through it real lazily and just kind of blow it off. And we want to draw that kid in too, because we want that kid to get better. It's really easy for kids to get comfortable with being good at something and not realize that there's a lot of other people that are at that same level that are actually still working to get better. And we don't want them to get left behind. So we don't want them to miss out on the opportunities to grow as well. And so I think giving them some personal ownership can really help.
Got it. Now I got it.
Yeah. All right. Other thoughts? Awesome. Then kind of rolling on, just a reminder to, if you haven't already done so, to be looking around for a grit coach on your team who will be sort of that liaison for the grit program. That's going to be a formal role next season, but we're asking everyone to kind of get started on that this season so that they can identify the grit coach for their team, who will be the primary contact for the grit events and with the grit coordinator. So if you can just remember, if you haven't already done that, to just sort of be looking around and see who you want, and who might be interested in that role. And then a couple of reminders, just again, that student athlete registration closes on the 31st of January, and race registration will open on February 1st. So there's a distinct period where we stop taking registrations and we will start taking race registration. There's going to probably be a delay between student athlete registration closing and race registration opening up. It probably will not be this one day turnaround. And that is due to some things that we are trying to do to tweak what we had previously said was going to be this 500 rider cap on races. We actually have figured out a way to do this with a lot greater fidelity that will kind of not, it won't be a 500 rider race event cap. It's going to be on wave starts. And so it will have a lot less impact on a lot more of our student athletes. So I think once we get all the details ironed out, I think it will be much better in the long run, especially addressing a lot of the concerns that people had about like seniors, the JV, two and varsity riders, female student athletes, all of that. I think it's a much, much better solution that we've found to help keep races safe. And so I think everyone will be pleased with that. And it's just going to require a little bit of a delay so that we can do some figuring of who all we have registered so we can make sure that all that works out. All right. I'm going to open the floor up to all of you to see if there's any questions or concerns that you all would like to share. All right, I feel like I've waited my appropriately long and uncomfortable teacher period of silence to see if there were any questions. Um, Other than that, really appreciate all of you joining us. I do want to let you know that we are currently working on an OTBS 101 course for a new team. And if there are any open slots in that, we will open those up and advertise those to the rest of the league. But as of right now, we don't have any more details that we can offer than that. And we don't know that there will be any open slots, but several of you have inquired about that. I just wanted to let you know that there is a possibility that that will happen in January. And so let me be clear, it's not that participation will not be capped. There will still be caps. However, they will not be on the race as a whole. They will be on individual waves. And so there are a couple of waves that are probably going to be affected, but there are a lot of waves that will not be. So there will be some waves where not everyone who would like to race will be able to race. So let me be very upfront about that. This is still going to result in some kids not being able to race that may want to, but it will not be the sledgehammer that the 500 rider cap was going to be. All right. And so Caroline, I don't have any details to offer you right now. So, and then Janet, you say, can you summarize the likely affected groups? Yeah, absolutely. The likely affected groups are the middle school 6, 7B, 8B boys category, and the freshman JV1 category for boys as well. Those two categories are traditionally the biggest And so if we see ridership totals like we saw in 2020, the last time we raced, then those two waves would definitely be affected by the cap. But all in the name of safety. All right, Nikki?
The rain date on 4/30/51, the Mayodan, is that if any of the previous races are canceled?
As far as I know, yes.
That's a cumulative like rain date.
Yes.
It's the rain date for all the prior ones. Okay.
Yes.
And Dark Mountain will not have a rain date, and the second Mayodan will not have a rain date.
Yes, correct. So let's keep our fingers crossed that Dark Mountain, the race that everyone wants to have and has only happened once, that actually escapes any rain. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining tonight, and I hope everyone has a great, happy holiday, and we will see you in the new year.
Sean, one more question.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody. Is there any chance with this? I mean, most of my team are kids that are going to be in the groups that are at risk to being capped. Is there going to be anything like protected spots for your local race, or have you guys considered anything like that?
It's not that it's what is considered, is that Pit Zone literally doesn't have any fidelity like that. We couldn't say like this team definitely gets the spots in this race or anything like that. Like there's no functionality in Pit Zone for us to do that with registrations, unfortunately.
I believe it.
Yeah, we discovered that the only thing we can do is to set rider limits for classes. So like I can set a rider limit for a category within a wave. So that's kind of where we started developing this idea of just capping the number of riders in a given wave rather than it being, we let 500 people register and we cut it off at that point. So
is there any possibility we could not have the registration for all the races open up the same time in case I have some students who aren't sure if they want to race. They want to go to a race and check it out, but if they're all filled up.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. That's definitely something that that we're considering and talking about. But yeah, there's nothing set in stone right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm voicing opinion that it would be good to have rolling like a staggered sign up times just for the new teams and the kids that aren't sure if they want to race, and then they get all excited about it, but then they can't race that whole year. That's just
agreed. So we'll take a look at that and see what we can do.
Cool.
Sean.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Getting some feedback. So I'm assuming you mentioned that there will be a lag between final registrations and race registration opening. And did I hear you say that y'all are going to take that time to, once you get the groups identified and the numbers, then you'll tease out the different ratios? And how are you guys coming up with the ratios of making the choices which groups to limit, other than the fact that this group is big? Like, are you comparing historical data and trying to match that?
Yeah, so we know a safe number of riders that can exist on course at one time. And so that's the number, and that will be applied to every group. It's not like we're just going to decide this group, we're going to turn this on, but this group, we're not going to. It will be every group has that cap. It's just that some categories, if they were to approach that cap, would be awesome that we had that many kids. Especially in, like, you look at high school female student athletes, like if we had the number of kids that would approach a cap, that would be great, but we just aren't there yet. So this way, realistically, the only two categories that we foresee being affected are the middle school B boys and that freshman JV1 category of boys as well. Other than that, we haven't historically seen ridership numbers in races that would approach the cap for the other categories.
Thank you. That's awesome. That's really clear.
Yes.
Numbers per
So-
wave.
Yes, numbers per wave would be 150 is kind of the number that we're going with, and then how that would affect each one of those is going to be, largely for most waves not a problem.
So Sean, I got a quick question if you don't mind.
Yes, no problem.
We're in the process of getting our team sort of organized with jerseys, those who are interested in racing, because we've been told, I've been told that in order to race, we must have jerseys. So I potentially sixth grade boys now who are purchasing jerseys who might not get a chance to race. Is that right?
Potentially, yes. However, let's walk that back just a little bit. They don't have to have jerseys. They just have to have the same, they just have to be wearing the same thing. We've had teams that actually showed up in t-shirts that all just said their team name on them. And they all have white t-shirts and they had all been written on, in black marker. So they just have to be recognizably from the same team. So that's one way of doing it. We always see that we have student athletes who purchase jerseys on our team that they may or may not race, but they like the team aspect of it. They have a jersey, they're on the team, they really enjoy wearing that and being a part. So it's not just viewed as race wear, it's just viewed as something that they wear all the time. And who are you going through to get your jerseys?
Podium wear?
Podium wear, okay. So like typically what we do is we always push our student athletes towards the short sleeve trail jersey because it's $40. And for most everybody, that's really reasonable. And what we see is that as our teams get older, then when kids outgrow their jerseys, they give them back to us and say, pass this on to the next kid. So we have kind of this whole little bin of jerseys that we can hand out to kids who maybe aren't sure if they want to race, or they are, just not able to financially support everything that we're kind of asking. It's like, here's a jersey, those sorts of things kind of really help. And that as you get a little bit more mature with your team, that'll definitely be something that starts to emerge as well.
Thank you.
No problem.
Our team also has a couple of jerseys that we just bring to each race, and if somebody forgets them.
Yeah, inevitably somebody forgets a jersey. I've had shoes forgotten, all those things. Yeah.
You can have one or two extras if people can't buy them, and just let those kids wear it at the race.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. And that's something that like Golden and I typically, whenever we do a jersey order, like we'll order jerseys we coach 3 teams. So we'll order one from each team so that we have one, and then we can hand that to a kid if need be. So.
It's nice to have a few for sizing anyway.
Well, you just either that or you just make sure that all the kids on your team are extra small or small. So as soon as they outgrow the small, like, sorry, you can't be on the team anymore. All right. Any other questions? You guys get really talkative whenever it's time to go. You're like my students. You say nothing, and it's like, okay, bye, and there's like all of a sudden everybody talks.
So Sean,
Yes.
I have a correction to what I stated earlier from listening to you.
Yes.
Let me restate it. It's
Okay.
not numbers per wave. It's what's important to hear is numbers on the course at any one point in time.
Yes.
That helps me understand it better. So thank you.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we're very concerned about number of riders on course at a given time, and we saw that especially with the very last race that we've had, which was that one and only Browns Creek race of 2020, which was very large with the middle school boys B and the freshman JV1 boys. Those were very large categories. But even then, as big as they were, the JV1 freshman boys would not be tremendously impacted by a 150 rider limit, but the middle school B boys would definitely have more of an impact. But I think we can all agree that that's kind of like, of all the categories to really be concerned about safety wise, like throwing, I think we had 180 some middle school boys on course at one time. And I know like the 6th grade boys B winner, he passed, I want to say 60 or 70 riders in one lap. I mean, like that's a lot of passing. That's a lot of opportunity for something to go wrong. And that's what we're trying to limit.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Sean,
Yes.
this is Carolyn Prey. I started at Holy Trinity Middle School, so I'm trying to anticipate when you guys open this registration up, because I've already told both of my teams that things are changing this year.
Mhm.
Do you think there's going to be log jams when everybody's on your system all at once? Do you think I need to make myself available to families that day and in panic about getting into their races?
Michael Eastwood, you are the most knowledgeable pit zone person I know.
I have
If
no
you were a
idea.
betting man, what
Yeah.
would you say?
Slow refresh times, probably. I don't
think it'll
know that
crash?
it would crash. I have no idea. All I know is that it slows down. Like when we would open for like coach registration or student athlete registration, things would slow down, or there'd just be a lag of the automatic updates. But I don't know what would happen in a registration system like this. I will say that other leagues have different ways that they register. So there are systems where there's heavy load, and I don't think that it's crashed in those scenarios, but
Okay.
refresh.
Better be knocking on wood.
So big thing is everyone use Chrome. Like that is, I think, the one browser that doesn't have issues or hadn't had issues in the past with the Pit Zone. I know that Internet Explorer and Safari have different issues. Sometimes things not loading correctly and whatnot. So I would just advise everyone to use Chrome
Okay.
and be patient.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome. Well, happy holidays to everyone. And we'll see you in the new year.
Ditto, likewise.
Go ride your bike.
Always.
Thank you, everyone. Why am I not